This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, I'm Dr. Annette Cargioli, and I'm the founder and the writer, the inventor of emotional polarity technique. I've been doing this for over 25 years. EPT is the short form of what we call emotional polarity technique. So you might see EPT, EPT works. It is a completely different approach in emotional healthcare. And I really mean that. I don't want you to think about traditional therapy. I don't want you to think about taking a medication, a one and done kind of thing, because EPT is basically a technique or a strategy that quickly uses the body's responses to identify what unresolved conflicts still exist in your mind from your past that we can resolve using forgiveness. And the great thing about EPT, people say, well, I've forgiven and all of that. Well, in EPT, we train people to be experts in forgiveness. So as you watch an EPT forgiveness session, you realize that we really are talking to the mind and talking to the body and talking to the person in the past to change the way their perception of that unresolved conflict is held so that the conflict is then resolved. And as a result of that, most people will notice like an immediate lightening or immediate um, pain can be alleviated and things start working out in their life better, faster than they ever thought possible. So today I'm going to be working with Brittany. Where are you from, Brittany?
Um, Dayton-ish, Ohio, so Xenia, Ohio.
Oh, have you done any EPT?
Yes, and so does my son. That's how I originally had found saw doctor. He has been diagnosed with ADHD, and he had done the medicine, but all the side effects, and we just weren't really happy. So we were trying to seek out something different.
Wow. Well, yeah, APT is a great approach with ADHD kids. I can tell you that. Over the years I've done this, I'm always amazed at how ADHD kids are really people who are brilliantly looking away from a sad story. And
Hmm.
they train themselves to look away, which is basically don't pay attention, and then you won't have to deal with what is overwhelming to you. So that's
Hmm.
usually what the conflict is, but it's because it's this brilliant strategy by their mind to protect them from something that's super sad and overwhelming. You have to kind of deal with the sad and overwhelming, and then they start to learn it's safe to pay attention. It's okay. And there are people that will help me and I can ask for help and that kind of thing. So, well, that's awesome. So you've done EPT, and I'm guessing you've done it in person.
Yes.
Okay, because I'll throw in here EPT for years and years, it was only done in person, and then COVID hit, and I knew that I couldn't just do it in person. And an in person EPT session and a remote session are about 80% the same. So the differences are I can't reach and hold the points. I hold them on me. I tell you where to position your hands. And the other thing is I use magnets, always use magnets in person. And the other thing I use is a sound therapy machine, which is called a infratonic 9. And it's basically an energy field interrupter, and I'm actually putting it on me while I'm doing the session because I
Okay.
happen to believe that remote sessions derive a lot of energy from us that we don't have to expend when we're with the person in person.
Okay.
So that's for anybody who's an energy worker who wonders about that. So because I'm assuming you don't have any magnets.
Actually, I do have one
Ah,
set
you
of
do.
magnets. Yes.
That's amazing. Oh, I'm so happy. All right. So a lot of these
We
remote
love them.
Oh, I love it. So a lot of these remote sessions, yeah, I'm thinking a little kid would love them too. Yeah, remote sessions, I sometimes will do the first session and we just kind of mimic the magnets because the person
Mhm.
doesn't have a set. So I'm thrilled that you have them. So I don't that makes this a lot easier. And I tell people if they've done one session and they want to continue to do remote sessions, I
Mhm.
just recommend to them you just need to buy a set of magnets
Mhm.
because we can do it remotely, but you're going to get closer to the in-person session if you've got magnets.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have a more, I want to say a magnetic field interferes with the field that you currently have going on. And what that means is, so maybe a kid is fearful or a person feels anxiety, and that's a certain frequency your body is holding. You know you're anxious because you feel anxious. So
Mm-hmm.
magnets actually interfere with the pattern of how the emotions are running in your body, so that you can basically then rewrite and say, I don't want to feel that. I've decided to feel this a whole lot easier. Because as you
Mm-hmm.
know, if you've got anxiety, you can't just snap out of it and say, I'm going to feel better now. There's a lot more body cues going on.
Oh yeah.
So EPT is approaching emotional health care from a body, mind, spirit aspect, because all three are involved. And when you only work with the mind, or you only work with the body, or only work with the spirit, it sometimes is a slower haul to get where you need to go. So what did you want to work on today? Did you know?
Um, I am currently, this is my last week of maternity leave. I know that I'm feeling very anxious about um, going back to work with the newborn. He has Down syndrome, so he's,
Mhm.
in that high risk category, and I'm a preschool teacher. So there's just a lot of changes going on right now, and I'm very anxious. I can feel
So
it.
anxious, and probably even anxious because I have a child who has known disability,
Hmm.
and even their lifespan can be shorter
Hmm.
because of just the different changes in their body, the heart issues, and that kind of thing. I
Yes, he
will
does
tell you
have
this
one.
too. Yeah, I have I have several Down syndrome clients. They
Hmm.
love EPT. They
Hmm.
love it.
Hmm.
And I mean, it just kind of it amazes me, um, their perception of, they're so in tune. I mean, and I'm talking about adult Down's children.
Hmm.
But they have loved coming in and doing EPT and doing body work. They sense that it's better, and that they
Hmm.
know, and their heart is so forgiving anyway. Oh my goodness. So, but I understand. I had a friend, well, my roommate from college, actually, her second child was Down syndrome. Is this your second?
This is actually my third.
Okay. And I actually did work with her. She asked me to come up and visit her because she had so many concerns about, the future in general. Because how is this going to work out, and how is my life as this child gets older and becomes an adult? There's so many things that go through a mom's mind,
Hmm.
which could make you feel anxious. And in the moment, and the other thing is, it gets in the way of you being able to really enjoy the development of this child,
Hmm.
how this child is going to develop just beautifully, and be this amazing gift in your life.
Hmm.
But then again, you're saying, like, I'm leaving the baby. What's the baby's name?
Samuel.
Samuel. So you're going back to work. And so that's some of it too. And how old is Samuel?
He's 12 weeks, so he'll be 3 months the next day after I go back to work.
Wow. Okay. So who's going to be watching him?
Um, Actually, a preschool teacher that I worked with before, so she
Oh,
is
that's
not doing
nice.
that anymore, and so she set off. We offered her to babysit. So, and then our middle son is going to like a half day program, and she'll watch him in the afternoon too. And
Oh,
I
that's
think too, a
nice.
lot of it might be, I've just always had this fear of judgment, and I don't know where it's coming from. So, I mean, I think that correlates with it too, like a
Yeah.
judgment fear of me and my mom abilities and all of that. Probably, I know it ties
Yeah.
together.
Well, and even, there's so much that could come up with that,
Hmm.
where, yeah, where you even you harshly judge yourself in the situation, without
Mhm.
anybody else judging you. All right, so we're going to start with what stage of healing are you in? We're going to say we would like to um, give you greater calm
Mhm.
about moving in back into your place of work and allowing Samuel to develop and grow at the rate that he can and
Mhm.
will, and that it works out really beautifully, and that you can feel comfortable just like you could if he was a child who didn't have Down syndrome.
Mhm.
Because I think you would probably admit if he didn't have Down syndrome, I think this might be easier.
Oh, it definitely would. I think too the pandemic really, has me more frightened because I know that if he gets a lung infection, it's going to affect him a lot more because he does have an ASD in his
Yeah.
heart. And I mean, and
Yeah.
not necessarily COVID, I mean, like bronchitis or RSV, but just any of that,
Yes.
we have to be extra cautious.
Right. Well, and that's true even if COVID wasn't around,
Hmm.
because they have that vulnerability
Hmm.
and that tendency to have that weakness. Um, all right, so we're going to say, what stage of healing are you in? Ah, anger. So this is stage 2. So for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about or have never heard me say what stage of healing, I'm starting with what stage of healing. And the 7 stages of healing are on my little blue card. It's also in the book, A Forgiveness Doctor. Stage 1 is denial. That's, oh, it's going to be okay, even though deep down inside, I don't really feel like it's going to be okay. And stage 2 is anger. This is really hard and I'm not enjoying this. People don't understand how hard it is to have your 3rd kid and have just higher needs. Not only that, but 3 kids is like the deal breaker. They outnumber you. Um, and then bargain is the next one. Bargain is where you say, okay, I'll do whatever I need to do. It'll come, it'll be okay. And then after bargain is depression. And that's where I just feel weighted down with all of the stress of having to pull all of this together. And on top of it, having a child who has more extraordinary needs. And then after depression is acceptance, where, you know what, I love this child. I see this child as a gift. And you know what, God's going to provide everything he needs and everything I need. And I just need to show up as the face of loving motherhood. So depression is where I just feel so stuck. Like, I don't know how that's going to happen. And then after depression is acceptance. Acceptance is, I'm really grateful for everything that's going on here. After acceptance is light emerging, where, wow, this child is bringing me more gifts and more, I want to say more goodness in my life than I ever thought possible for our family. How did we ever live without him? And then light emerging goes to creation of new life, where now you are accepting and you realize, there's greater needs going on here, but everything I need keeps happening. Like, God keeps showing up and fulfilling what I need. And I just need to show up and enjoy this ride, because that's what Samuel's doing.
Hmm. Hmm.
He's just showing up. Yeah. So, all right. So anger. So, I want to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your subjective units of distress? Well, 10. You're really distressed.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to write that down. So it's a 10. So all that means is that when you think about this and you're just kind of trying to hold it all together, but at the same time, I'm a hot mess.
Mhm.
So
I
yeah.
tend to feel
So
things pretty 10-ish, most of my feelings.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, and then is there a subjective units of elation? No, that's a 0. And then show up, pay attention, tell the truth, let go. Yeah, you're not good at letting go, which is, yeah, maybe that's what Samuel came to teach you.
Yeah.
It's okay, Mom. It's it. God's got this. I'm like, you'll be amazed at me. All right. So I'm going to start with having you do rapport. So I'm going to
Okay.
have you put the green side, or if you have blue, sometimes it's
They're
blue.
blue.
It's either, yeah, blue. So you're going to put those on either side of your head, and then squeeze your head together as you breathe in, and breathe out, and breathe in, and breathe out, and squeeze in as you breathe in, and breathe out. And then holding those magnets still on the sides of the head, I want you to reach around to the front and to the back with your fingers. It's a little awkward, but, and then lift your head up as you breathe in. So breathe in and breathe out, and breathe in and breathe out, and breathe in, breathe out. Just so everybody knows, and you can bring the magnets down. I am using fake magnets. These are just my covers because I don't really want to just throw magnets on me while I'm working on Brittany. All right, so here we are at stage 4, and the first issue, or you're at stage 2, anger. How many issues? 2 issues. So we're going to start with the first issue. Think about the first issue, and I'm muscle testing through a strategic question and answer where I'm looking for body cues that tell me what I'm looking for, what your body's already, the story your body's already telling. We're just framing it up as close as we can get it. So yeah, it's yeah. So let's see. It's 1 issue of family, current, self, grief, my grief. So I feel grief with myself. What's your grief? Is it because you're afraid, because you're not good enough as a mom?
Yes, I think that hits it pretty home.
All right. So grief with self. That's not it. So I muscle tested that answer for those of you who might watch this, because we could spend months talking about how she doesn't think that, but her body says, no, that's not it.
Okay. So grief.
So my grief with myself, is it my grief with myself because I don't know how to manage a child that is different?
I think maybe it's just that grief, it's just not what I expected. You know, it's unexpected, and I don't know.
Oh, wait. So Samuel, you didn't know Samuel was going to have needs.
Well, I mean, I knew that he was going to be like, we had an amniocentesis done, and we
Yeah.
did know that he was going to have Down syndrome. But like when I got pregnant, and just hearing that, I
You
grieved.
didn't. So your grief is, I didn't get the baby that I was expecting to get.
Yeah.
That fits. Yep. That's it. So my grief with myself is I didn't expect this to happen in my life. I didn't expect this pregnancy to grow a baby that had special needs.
Yes.
And my grief is it, yeah, because I didn't expect it. And I'm going to say it's like, my grief is for the baby that Samuel could have been if he wasn't Downs.
Hmm.
So it's like I envisioned a 3rd child, just not this one.
Hmm.
So
Not
the
maybe
grief,
not with so many needs, because I already have 2 other children. I think that,
yeah,
and one of them is kind of special needs with his ADHD, and he's got a little bit
yeah,
of oppositional defiant disorder too. So,
yeah,
um, I just wasn't expecting to have such another high needs child.
right. So I'm going to say the grief is, and my grief with myself is because of a baby that never existed that I feel like I lost.
Okay.
So that would be the baby who's got the, high IQ and knows how to do stuff and doesn't have a heart problem. And that baby never existed, but that's what everybody expects,
Hmm.
you know? So when you find out that's not what this one is, it's like everything that I thought I had, I lost, even though I just imagined it.
Right.
So
That
my
makes.
grief, yeah. So the grief is because I lost the baby that didn't have all those needs because
Mhm.
somehow, because I lost the baby I was expecting,
Mhm.
that was in my mind as what it would be. So, yep, that's it. Lost. I'm gonna go lost baby. That no, it's yeah. So is there an earlier time? Now I'm asking about earlier time because it's possible that in utero you could add a twin you lost, or that
Mhm.
you had that a baby died with when you were a little kid. I mean, all of that could be. But I get that this is the first time.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know any other baby losses.
No.
Okay, that
Like I've
you're
not
familiar
had a
with.
miscarriage, or, I don't know of
Right, right.
anybody in my family that's lost a baby or anything like that.
Right, right. So, and when I muscle test, I get this is the first time. So your grief is with the loss of the baby. Yeah, and even there's more to this grief. There's grief with the loss of the life that would have gone with the baby that I didn't get.
Mhm.
That would have been a lot easier in my mind than the one with this child.
Mhm.
Even though I don't know that, you
Right.
know, it just seems that way.
Mhm.
Um, and it seems more likely that would be true. Okay, lost baby, lost life. Okay. All right. So we're going to do the grief first. And so let's see. I'm going to say grief. Yeah. So you're going to put the red side. Those are my magnets. I should be using this. The red side on your lung, on your right lung.
Right
Yeah,
lung.
right lung. And the other thing you're going to do, let's see. Yeah. So the other thing you're going to do is you're going to put the red side on your forehead of the magnet. And then we're just going to think about the grief you didn't allow yourself to feel or have because I was grieving the loss of a baby that never was, but for me it was real
Mhm.
because I really expected that baby to be there and not this one with more needs. Okay, breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in and breathe out. And then breathe in one more time and breathe out. All right. And then you can take the magnets down and then take these down. Yeah. And then are there any other emotions? No. So this grief, and I would guess that your anxiety is trying to protect you from the grief of the loss that you couldn't prevent. So phase one, phase two, heart. And this means that you have sort of like a broken heart. So what I want
Mhm.
you to do is I'm going to have you hold your magnets um, like with your red on the right hand like that. So what we're doing is we're covering her acupuncture points. While you're holding that, I'm going to rub these points just below the collarbone as a
Mhm.
proxy for you to hold you kind of to hold everything together while we do the statements. And it's
Okay.
also just it's interfering. So we're slipping in a new story that we want your mind not to rebel against. So that's why we're doing the magnets and the points and all of that. So I need you to say, I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that it's stupid for me
that it's stupid for me
to cry or feel sad
to cry or feel sad
over the loss of a baby that never really was,
over the loss of a baby that never really was,
the baby that didn't have Down syndrome,
the baby that didn't have Down syndrome,
the baby that was going to be easier,
the baby that was going to be easier,
the baby that would um, make our family easier.
the baby that would make our family easier.
And then breathe. I forgive myself
I forgive myself
for feeling grief
for feeling grief
because, yeah, over the loss of a baby.
over the loss of a baby
that wasn't even Samuel,
that wasn't even Samuel,
just a child I imagined.
just a child I imagined.
And then breathe. I forgive myself for feeling grief
I forgive myself for feeling grief
over the life that I lost.
over the life that I lost.
When I found out
When I find out
that my baby had higher needs,
that my baby had higher needs,
and that how I thought my life was going to be was completely different.
and how I thought my life was going to be was completely different,
And how I thought my future with my children was going to be
and how I thought my future with my children was going to be
was completely different.
was completely different.
And then breathe. I forgive myself
I forgive myself
for holding on
for holding on
to the life
to the life
that never existed.
that never existed,
The one where I could know for certain
the one where I could know for certain
that my adult children were going to be okay on their own.
that my adult children were going to be okay on their own.
And then breathe. I forgive myself
I forgive myself
for holding on
for holding on
to the child
to the child
that never existed.
that never existed,
The one I thought I was going to have
the one I thought I was going to have
before I found out Samuel had Downs.
before I found out Samuel had Downs.
And then breathe. Ah, this is going so good. I forgive myself
I forgive myself
for believing
for believing
that if I grieve this loss,
that if I grieve this loss,
people will harshly judge me
that people will harshly judge me
and think I don't want Samuel,
and think that I don't want Samuel
when I do want Samuel.
when I do want Samuel.
I just didn't get over the loss of who I thought he was going to be.
I just didn't get over the thought
Loss.
of the loss
Who
that
who I
who I
thought
thought he was going to be
and who I thought I needed in my life.
and who I thought I needed in my life.
And then breathe. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that I have to pretend everything's all right
that I have to pretend everything's all right
so people don't harshly judge me
so people don't harshly judge me
for feeling grief,
for feeling grief,
not because Samuel has Downs,
not because Samuel has Downs,
but because I had an image of a child and that child isn't here.
because I had an image of a child and that child isn't here.
And I imagined
And I imagined
all of my children being capable adults to live on their own.
all of my children being capable adults to live on their own.
And I don't even know enough about Downs to know if that's true.
And I don't even know enough about Downs to know if that's true.
Because it could be different from one kid to another.
because it can be different from one kid to another.
And I want people to love Samuel,
And I want people to love Samuel,
even after I'm gone.
even after I'm gone.
And then breathe. I forgive myself for believing
I forgive myself for believing
that if I grieve the loss of the life I hoped for,
that if I grieve the life I
the
lost,
loss,
that I
the
hope,
loss
the loss
of the
of,
life
of a life that I had hoped
and
for,
the baby
and the baby
that I hoped for,
that I hoped for,
it means I don't love Samuel
it means I don't love Samuel,
and that I don't want him.
and I don't want him.
And that's not true.
And that's not true.
And then breathe. I give myself permission
I give myself permission
to grieve the loss
to grieve the loss
of all my hopes and expectations
of all my hopes and expectations
with a baby that never existed,
when a baby that never existed
except in my mind.
except in my mind.
And then breathe. I say yes
I say yes
to all of the grief and loss
to all the grief and loss
of a child I hoped for,
of a child I hoped for
that never even existed.
that never even existed.
And I call up all that grief
And I call up all that grief
and loss,
and loss,
and I release it
and I release it
from my body, mind, and spirit,
from my mind, body, and spirit,
and the soul
and the soul
of this family.
of this family.
And then breathe. Without this grief,
Without this grief,
I open up massive space
I open up massive space
to welcome Samuel
to welcome Samuel
with all his faults and flaws,
with all of his faults and flaws,
just like the rest of us.
just like the rest of us.
I welcome him into this family,
I welcome him into this family,
into a circle of love,
into a circle of love,
where he becomes, well, where he is a cherished gift,
where he is a cherished gift,
full of surprises
full of surprises
that make the world
that make the world
a better place.
a better place.
And then breathe. Without this pattern
Without this pattern
of grief
of grief
and loss,
and loss,
yeah, I am free
I am free
to accept
to accept
Samuel is exactly who I was supposed to have.
that Samuel is
Is
exactly
exactly
who
who
I'm supposed to
he's
have
supposed and who he is supposed to be.
and who he is supposed to be.
And then breathe. Wow. Without this pattern
Without this pattern,
I am free
I, I am free
to love and care for Samuel
to love and care for Samuel
in all of his changes and development
in all of his changes and development
and needs,
and needs,
just like I did my other kids.
just like I did my other kids.
And Samuel
And Samuel
is so grateful
and is so grateful
to be here
to be here.
and breathe. Without this grief,
Without this grief,
I can stop uh, worrying about the future that hasn't come.
I can stop worrying about the future that hasn't come.
Yeah, the future when Samuel's an adult, I let go of worrying about that.
The future when Samuel is an adult, I let go of that.
I let go of trying to figure out how his life is going to work for him.
I let go of trying to figure out how his life is going to work for him.
And that frees me
And that frees me
to show up,
to show up,
letting go of all the outcomes
letting go of all the outcomes,
and being a loving mom
and being a loving mom
to all my children.
to all my children.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I let go of everything I cannot change in Samuel.
I let go of everything that I cannot change in Samuel.
And that frees me
And that frees me
to just love him the way he is
to love him the way he is
and to trust God
and to trust God
for his development
for his development
all the way through his adulthood.
all the way through his adulthood.
And then breathe. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I am free
I am free
to find greater joy
to find greater joy
existing in our family
existing in our family
with Samuel
with Samuel
than we had before.
than we had before.
And then breathe. Oh, so good. All right, so let me see what the stage, I'm like knocking my, all right, so stage of healing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got all the way to 5, stage 5, which is acceptance. How are you feeling?
Good, really good. A little bit lighter.
I felt a couple really profound shifts and releases. Yeah, so I just think you're gonna be like tremendous. I do, I want to say a few more statements. So I need you to just hold this point, like up here. Yeah, you hold that, the collarbone point, and I
Okay.
need you to say, without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I don't need anxiety
I don't need anxiety
to save me
to save me
from the grief of losing a child that was just in my imagination.
from the grief of losing a child that was just in my imagination,
That, yeah, that was never gonna be with
that was
Samuel.
never going to be.
And then breathe. I'll do one more. Without this pattern,
Without this pattern,
I no longer need anxiety
I no longer need anxiety
to save me
to save me
from from the grief
From the grief.
of everything in my life changing
Of everything
when
in my
I
life changing.
changing and me losing what I was certain of
And losing what I was certain of.
when I found out that Samuel had Downs.
When I found out that Samuel had Downs.
And then breathe. Yay. So much better. Yeah, so the anxiety is kind of a firewall because you go to take care of Samuel and that grief comes up and oh, I'm not allowed to have that grief because it might mean I don't want Samuel. And it doesn't mean that. It just means I had a baby and then I found out that this is the baby I have, not that one. So in my mind, I lost a baby.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I just needed to grieve that loss so that I could have everything I need to be with Samuel. All right, so stage of healing after those statements. 6, yes, light emerging. So you feel lighter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel anything in your body that's bothersome or is it okay?
My tailbone has been hurting and I have no idea why. I haven't had a drop, like, a fall or anything. It's gotten better here in the past couple of days, but it was just kind of odd.
Was it from the delivery?
No. It just had happened like a few days ago and it was really bad. Like, it hurt to sit down. Like,
So it
last,
doesn't hurt. Does it hurt right now?
it's a little tender, but not near as bad as it was like 3 days ago.
Okay, so it's a little tender. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what is it?
I get to.
You know what? Yeah, it's also, I'm just going to pull it up. It's tucked under is why it hurts. And I think it's tucked under because you've been in such a state of anxiety that your body is kind of tucking under and going into panic with leaving this child.
Yeah.
So I feel like, so I'm going to tell you what you need to do for that panic. So if you could imagine your tailbone tucking under like a dog tucks their tail under, so you yourself can pull that up just by going on your sacrum because it's connected to your sacrum. So as you kind of pull up toward the top of your head from your, back end, that's a way of lifting that tailbone back out. The other thing you want to do is you want to pull down on your throat and then also on your sternum. So if you take your sternum and your rib cage and push the whole thing down, and then we'll just take a couple of deep breaths while you're pushing down. Oh yeah, that's like a lot. This is a good move for you. Where you breathe in and you just keep letting that part of your frame and your body rest down. Because when you go in panic, all of this shoves up. And then the next one is on your pubic symphysis, your pubic bone right in the front. You wanna, and I won't videotape that because it might look strangely suspicious. So you just go down. So you take your hands and you push that pubic bone down as though you're rocking the whole back of this up. So it's all connected. So you breathe and you push it down. Yeah. Oh, that should. Okay, I'm going to tell you that you somehow you were thinking about stuff and you went into a state of panic. When you went to the state of panic, when people get sufficient panic, they lose their voice. They can't even scream. And the reason is because panic in a body, everything on the front of the body jams up into your throat. So your sternum literally shoves up, your rib cage pops up, your hyoid bone, which is right here, it goes like this. That's why some people can't even talk when they get severely panicked. And your pelvis rocks forward, which those pubic bones are rocked up. So everything on the front kind of goes up to the throat. And it makes it hard to breathe. And you just feel, because that heart isn't even encased correctly. And then the other thing is the tailbone tucks under. So if you just kind of let yourself breathe and move everything down and breathe, you can reset that physical panic button so that that's not going to like go off so easily. And so you pull the tailbone up and you pull everything in the front down. And I like that the sternum is usually the biggie, the sternum and the hyoid bone.
Mhm.
So just holding those down. And then when you push the pubic bone down, you're actually, you're taking that whole pelvic girdle and rocking it in a better direction. So yeah, so that should help that tailbone too. But I think that's, it should help it. You shouldn't go into the panic as easily. All right,
Okay.
and so that's better. So let's see, I'm going to ask, what are your subjective units of distress? Oh, I got that it's a 0 right now. You went from a 10 to a 0, and your let go is fantastic. And let's see, your judgment and your mom abilities. I just think the grief was making, you're great with your mom abilities. It was because I don't know how I feel about this, something must be wrong with me. And it's like, no, I just need to grieve something. Plus, there is that, when you have a child that is special needs and you don't know what that looks like when they're adults, then it changes your whole life.
Mhm.
I mean, that's one of the things that parents of autistic children, they go through a like a huge loss of, and their fear that they will pass away before their child and no one will love their child. Like there's all of that. And I'm thinking that so you can go so far into the future to try to figure things out. You gotta
Mhm.
stop doing that. You have to say, I have 3 kids to take care of today. I don't have
Mhm.
time to think about how their adulthood is going to be. That part I'm just going to hand over to God.
Mhm.
While I do, the only thing I can do is show up today and be a loving mother.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you should feel a whole lot better. That
Okay.
was fantastic.
I do.
Huh?
I said
And
I
then
do.
good, so good. And that little Samuel, oh my goodness, yeah, those little Downs babies, they have such tremendous potential. It's amazing. Their
Mhm.
potential, it's not the same as another kid, but you know what? You can have a kid who totally fails as an adult who's not Down syndrome. You
Mhm.
never know. I mean, it doesn't guarantee that you're not going to be on the struggle bus with an adult child just because they don't have special needs.
Mhm.
Um, so you just never know. It's not, you never know. That's why you have to let it go and say, this is what I have right now. We have this amazing family and this amazing child who's showing up here to show us a whole lot more joy than we ever thought was possible. So, anyway, I'm going to turn my recording off
Okay.
and thank you. You're okay with this being online?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I felt it was good. Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect.